by the power of Grayskull.
I made a money.
That's a big Twinkie.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the Cereal Box Prize podcast, the podcast that serves you 3 scoops of pop culture, and this is our Toy Owl segment, and we've been diving deep into the Transformers universe. We just did the first 3 films, so let me introduce everybody. If you have not joined us on the Transformers films, we have Ben on the line with us. Ben, what's going on?
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
I'm going good. I'm doing good. We don't have our partners in crime. Jake isn't here with us, or Aaron, but, you know, they'll be back with us next time, and we can do our Mystery Science Theater 3000 on these really awesome Oscar-worthy Transformer films. But today we're going to get on the Transformer movie toy lines. And Ben, I really don't know much about these Transformer movie toy lines, but were these the toys that actually brought back like Transformers to the forefront, let's say with the new kids growing up, the new generation, you would say?
Yeah, the first thing you need to know is that every movie-verse Transformers toy line is 30% Bumble Bee by volume. But there was a huge merchandising blitz to go along with the huge movie budgets and the huge advertising budgets.
Oh, wow. So pretty much this whole toy line is just like a bunch of Bumblebees produced over and over and over, and Optimus Prime also, I bet.
At times it feels that way, but there was actually quite a bit of variety back in the old days of 2007 compared to some of the newer movie-related toy lines, which we'll get into, I'm sure, another time. But yeah, the movies focused on kind of a core cast of 10 or so characters for each movie. You got your Optimus Prime, Megatron, Bumblebee, Starscream, and so on. And the toy lines reflected that too, because obviously you want to produce toys that the most kids are going to want. And movie 1 and 2 toy lines did experiment a lot with characters that were not part of the film, like at all, which I always thought was interesting. Movie 1 especially, a lot of the background vehicles from the film were actually rendered into a transforming robot. For example, if you recall the movie 1 scene where they have Josh Duhamel and his guys riding in those V-22 Ospreys,
Yep.
the tilt rotor planes. There is a late wave movie 1 Decepticon that turns into a V-22 Osprey, even though they never, had that as a character in the film. But yeah, the movie toy lines, kind of the big deal with them versus any prior Transformers toy line was that they were trying to appeal to all ages, and so they had toys appropriate for kids of every age, and that was kind of a recurring theme through even more recent movies like the Bumblebee movie. In fact, some of the first movie stuff was co-branded as Play School. For example, they had a Play School Optimash Prime, who's like a Mr. Potato Head with Optimus Prime parts.
Oh, that's awesome. I would love that figure.
That kind of, there was a spectrum going all the way up from, stuff that was appropriate for preschool kids, where it's like a one-step transformation, very sturdy, such as the Cyber Slammers, which are motorized, and the robot just kind of pops up out of the car when you flip the switch and let it run along the ground. And then they had a pretty major class called the Fast Action Battlers, which were like larger deluxe-sized figures, and they all had simple transformations. And the first step was always marked on the figure with a molded-in arrow that showed you where to pull apart first. And it was kind of geared to like get kids used to the play style of transforming your figure. And they were decently posable. And then each one had some sort of spring-loaded action feature, usually like a firing missile, which was, a mainstay of most action figure toys, from the 90s onwards. And then the bulk of the line was the size classes that were geared at older kids and collectors. And that's where you get into your kind of regimented ascending size and price points. And these are kind of familiar from the Armada, Energon, and Cybertron toy lines that we talked about earlier. In fact, a lot of the movie size classes were the same as the Cybertron ones from the year prior. So you start out with the smallest Scout class, which were $5, and they were, for the first movie, they were all redecos of previous toys, and they were all unrelated to the actual films.
Wow.
And they also happened to be all Target exclusives.
Yes.
The movies also were very big into store exclusives. If you wanted to collect the whole line, you had to chase all over to Target and Walmart and Kmart and Toys R Us.
You mean like we're doing right now with everything else? Just chasing around toys?
Yeah, here's the thing, is they usually had them in stock when you got there.
The good old days of toy hunting.
Yeah, the movie toy line was not hard to collect. You really couldn't walk 10 feet in 2007 without tripping over some movie toys. Granted, a few of the figures wound up being more scarce. As always, the guys that came out last were more scarce than the guys that came out first. Although famously, they bungled the release of the deluxe class Bumble Bee concept Camaro figure.
Huh.
So the first wave, you had we at TFL call it crap Camaro Bumblebee.
Okay.
Michaela in the movie says, "What a piece of crap." But the 1976 Camaro, where he's all beat up and he's got rust stains and stuff, that was part of the first wave. And then the concept Bumblebee didn't come out until like 2 or 3 waves later, after the movie had released in theaters. And they were very poorly distributed. Stores were already restocking the first and second waves, and so for a while, a lot of collectors had a very hard time finding the concept Camaro Bumblebee, who's kind of the main character of the show.
Yeah.
But eventually they did make it out in kind of general circulation, and it was easier to get one at your local Walmart or Target or whatever. And then, of course, there were 3 or 4 recolored releases of said figure. So the deluxe class, the Voyager class, and the Leader class were kind of the main 3 for collecting your core cast of characters and any of the other interesting, more detailed figures. And largely they were kind of sorted. The deluxe class were mostly the guys that turned into cars, and the bigger trucks like Ratchet and Ironhide were Voyagers, and then Leaders obviously was Megatron and Optimus. Notably, the Decepticon tank Brawl was released as both a deluxe class and a Leader class. And there were a couple other exceptions, where they turned that on its head. But the other big theme of those 3 classes, since those were all new figures designed for the movies, the Scouts were not, so they're not included in this, is they all had, they called it an automorph gimmick. And the automorph was some sort of feature on the toy that as you were transforming it manually, some other part of the transformation would automatically happen,
Huh.
usually by like a gear turning. So as you like fold a part of the figure, a gear would lift the head up out of the chest. It was very often part of the head or neck assembly, revealing the head kind of dramatically.
Okay.
And I think they did that to kind of mirror the movie where, you see these sweeping shots of all the little greebly bits moving on the robots, and then it pans upward, and eventually you see the head rising out of the chest, for the dramatic reveal of Optimus Prime or whatever. And the Automorph gimmick sounds neat on paper,
Yeah.
but anytime, and this goes for almost all Transformers from 1984 till today, anytime you have part of the figure transforming itself, it's a weak spot for breakage.
Mm.
The worst offender was deluxe class Decepticon tank Brawl. And when you move his chest down, his tank treads are supposed to go up onto his shoulders, and then his head comes up out of the chest. And they accomplished this with a gear about maybe a quarter inch in diameter, probably less, maybe like 3/16, and it was molded out of clear red plastic. And basically, the first time you transform it, even if you're very careful, that gear would crack, and then it's done. Now you got to reach your finger in there and pull the head up yourself. And there was a lot of frustration with that, even for an adult collector like me.
I mean, Ben, do you think that Hasbro actually took a look into that? I mean, if people were having a hard time, with that gear switch and, the heads breaking, like, I hope that somebody in Hasbro.
I do think I know that they did that because late in the movie line, there was a wave of Target exclusives called All Spark Power.
Okay.
And they were 4 main characters, deluxes, and they were almost identical to their original release, but they had this kind of electric blue. We call it All Spark Blue. And I think Hasbro bought the entire world supply of electric blue paint and plastic and just put it in everything from like mid-2007 to mid-2008.
Wow.
And Brawl was one of them. So it's exactly the same toy, except he's got this all-spark blue paint applied to his robot mode. But they made his shoulder gears opaque red plastic. They're not clear plastic anymore. Opaque plastics used a filler compound that makes them a little stronger, a little more resilient to cracking. So obviously somebody did get the memo and they fixed it, and that one is considerably better, but it's also less screen accurate because you got this blue paint just everywhere.
Oh, okay. That's interesting, man. It's funny with these Transformers movie line toys. Me and Aaron, we frequent the same flea market every summer, and the one thing that I always bump into when it comes to these Transformers movie toys, it's not the adult collector ones where we actually have to transform, but I always come across those plastic big ones that are meant more for like little kids. They don't even transform. They're just like this big hunk of Optimus Prime just made out of like plastic. And I'm always coming across these, man. They made a lot of those, man. There's a lot of those, like.
So in the early movie days, they had a series called Cyber Stompin' Robots, and there's only 2 of them from the first movie, and it's Optimus and Bumblebee. And they have like a bunch of electronic features, and the main, like other than the usual, like a button on their chest that makes them talk, the main gimmick was that their toes had a little bit of pivot, and when you like push the toe into the ground, it would make like a big robot stomping sound. And the electronics were pretty advanced in those, but they're very simple, chunky, play school, and those things are indestructible. And that's probably why you see them everywhere, is because they didn't break. That's kind of the opposite extreme of the Automorph thing. Is the less complex it is, the sturdier they can make it. And later they did more of those kind of big robots with, they don't even transform. They're just a big hunk of plastic. Except over the course of the years from like the 2007 movie up until I think the last ones of those came out around 2015.
Yeah.
They cheapened them. They didn't have electronics. They didn't have paint. They started to look really lame, whereas the initial ones were kind of cute and they were at least interesting in that they had all these features. Like Bumblebee had a kind of a rock'em sock'em feature where you push a little wheel on his arm and it would make his fist kind of pop out and then retract.
Oh, okay, okay.
But yeah, the later ones were just giant like 5-point articulation figures with
Yeah. I remember bumping into a lot of those, man. Now, here's my question to you, Ben, because and for the audience listening, being a big Transformer fan and collector, when this toy line came out, what was like your first thought? Like, were you like, okay, these are awesome, or did you have to get yourself into it? Like, what was your initial thoughts when this Transformer movie line came out?
So the toys came out, I want to say like a month and a half prior to the actual film, and there was a street date for them. And there was this whole first wave, like they released the first wave of every size class right up front, including a bunch of the merchandise and like role play weapons, and they have an Optimus Prime truck about this big, and you
Oh,
put
wow.
your arm in the trailer and grab the cab and pull it back, and it turns into a Nerf gun, like
That's
a
actually pretty
working
cool.
Nerf gun. And yeah, it was very cool.
That's cool,
And so
yeah.
the first day of release, I actually drove up to Ashland, Wisconsin, which was the closest Walmart to me, about an hour away. And I marched in there at like 8 o'clock in the morning, and I went to the toy aisle, and there was just rows of empty pegs. And I'm like, well, what the hell? Today's the street date. So I went and found an employee. I'm like, do you have any of these Transformers that you have marked, the pegs for? And she's like, oh, let me see. And she scans. She says, yeah, I'm showing that we had some of these off the truck, last night or whatever. And I
Right.
said, okay, well, can you bring them out? And she's like, well, which ones do you want? And I was like, yes. So she comes out with like the big, those big, huge inventory carts just full, and she's there with the box knife cutting the cases open, and I'm shoveling them into my cart as fast as she can get them open. And by and large, when I got home that night and just was tearing into this stuff, I thought it was great. I thought this was the best shit ever. The especially the adult collector-oriented ones, the Deluxe, Voyager, and Leader class, those were, what I'd been hankering for years, which is like realistic, licensed cars that have a good transformation and turn into an interesting robot, and they were posable. They had all these different interesting weapons. And part of me was still lukewarm on the movie aesthetic, the excessively detailed, and it's not as recognizable as like the G1s where you know exactly what you're looking at. But at the same time, they were very well designed, and so almost all of them I enjoyed, other than being frustrated that Deluxe Brawl broke on night one. And even the smaller sizes, like the more kiddie stuff, the fast action battlers were pretty solid. Like the Optimus Prime truck that turns into a Nerf gun. There was a Starscream that turns into a Nerf gun, and my sister, who's 8 years younger than me, and I had a blast, chasing each other around the house with those.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I had very positive impressions of those toys at the time. Now I'm a lot more dubious about them, simply because of the quantities they were produced.
Yes. I wanted to get into that. Actually, it's funny that you missed a good segue because, like I just when this first toy line came out, like I started bumping into these, like Target, Walmart, starting getting them. But I remember seeing a lot of Optimus Prime and Bumblebee, lots of Optimus Primes and Bumblebee. And then I will say though, they did come out with this like deluxe kind of adult collector Optimus Prime movie figure and it just looked amazing. It almost looked like a statue. I saw it online one time, and it was like so cool. And I will say that Optimus Prime's paint deco in the film and the way the truck looks, I give it two thumbs up. I think they did a good job with like Optimus Prime in the movie, man. But yeah, like I just kept seeing the same figures over and over and over, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, they're gonna have to come out with more different Transformers. And just like you mentioned, they were taking the background vehicles, even though they weren't transforming, they will take those like you mentioned, like the jet. They made it turn into like a transformer. So like I can see how they couldn't just go off like those characters, because then they're gonna have to remold them or repaint them and come up with the same characters over and over again.
Yeah, and so they did kind of all of the above strategy. They continued to release like older toys, like pre-movieverse toys, as usually as store exclusives. Then they had the redecos of the main characters. You know, for every Optimus Prime, there was a Night Watch Optimus Prime where he was black and blue with silver flames and stuff. And I mean, most of those I thought were interesting, and I enjoyed, you know, buying them and owning them. And then they did do all these background vehicles, and then they did the recolors of the background vehicles. Really, it now kind of from the aftermarket perspective, most of those background guys I don't see through the shop nearly as much as your core cast. So they obviously were producing much greater quantities of, you know, Bumblebee, Barricade, Optimus, to even Megatron is not as common as some of the others. Starscream is another one that they must have made just tens of millions of. And then the background guys like the V-22 Osprey, they made a toy out of the tow truck that drags Bumblebee through the city. I don't know if you remember that.
I didn't know that. I remember that
He gets
scene.
his leg shot off or whatever, and so Michaela, you know, because her dad's a mechanic, she obviously knows how to work a tow truck. So they like strap Bumblebee to the back of this tow truck and drag him through the city, and he's kind of playing tail gunner. But they turned that into a figure called Long Arm.
Wow.
You know, they did a lot of cool stuff with the toys, but they definitely overproduced. You know, there was definitely a little more of the core characters than especially a modern collector market where we have masterpiece versions of these guys can really absorb. But it was a huge toy line too. You know, all told, if my collection, which is stored in boxes, it's like box after box after box after box of this stuff.
So let me ask.
That's just for movie one too.
Okay, so that's just for movie one. Now, you know, now we're getting into like movie two. So when movie two came out, now Hasbro's like, okay, we already had Bumblebee, we already had Optimus. Now, when they released Bumblebee and Optimus again for movie two, did you feel like you were getting the same thing all over again? Because, for example, like I feel like with the Ghostbusters toy line, you know, it's like how many Peter Venkmans, how many Egon Spanglers, like, you know, how many of those? Okay, I got the movie one Ghostbusters. Here's the movie two, but it's just guys in jumpsuits wearing proton packs. You know, so like with Transformers, it's like, okay, you already had Bumblebee from the first movie. You already had Optimus Prime from the first movie. So was it a different paint deco? Was it a different transformation for the second toy line? Like,
so it's kind of both depending on the figure. So that kind of getting to what you're saying about having, you know, you can only have so many Peter Venkmans.
right.
The benefit of Transformers is that you can make a character completely different by redesigning how it transforms.
Okay.
You know, you can get either the same truck into the same robot mode two completely different ways, or you can even get a completely different truck into the same looking robot mode, you know, by a completely different path. Or you can just recolor it. And they went for a mix of both with movie two. So movie 2, the toy line looked a lot like the movie 1 toy line in terms of, the size classes. They still had like the big chunky robots that don't transform, but now they give you like Sideswipe, who is a new character for the second movie, or Devastator. They have one where he's just like a big chunky robot, and you push a button and it spins his like chest grinder around, and there's electronics. And you still have like the cars where you just kind of smoosh them down and then they zip out along the floor, or flip out the robot from the top of the car. But movie 2 invested actually quite heavily into redesigning everybody. Most of the figures, or most of the characters, got some kind of major toy redesign for their Revenge of the Fallen toy. The exceptions were actually, Bumblebee was one of them. All they did was change his arms, and instead of giving you like a blaster that you clip onto his hand, his one arm is permanently a blaster, and they give you a missile that he could fire. They did some minor retooling, like they added a front air dam to the car and like a bigger hood scoop, because they changed the actual prop vehicles for movie 2. But like Optimus Prime, movie 1 leader class Optimus Prime and movie 2 leader class Optimus Prime are nothing alike. The only similarity is that they both turn from a red and blue semi into a robot. They're completely different figures. And then a lot of characters, they manage to have an excuse to give them a completely new body. Like Megatron is killed at the end of movie 1.
Right.
And then his Decepticons rebuild him in movie 2. And so now you can make a completely different toy for him. He went from being a jet thing into being a tank thing.
Yeah.
And so there were several new Megatron toys that were not at all related to the previous ones. Then there were a lot of SOOO exclusives, and a lot of those were recolors of older figures. I suspect because Hasbro didn't want to invest in designing new tooling for something that was going to be sold in lower quantities, because it was, a Kmart exclusive or whatever. So they just kind of used yesterday's designs for the store exclusives. But there were a lot of new designs for movie 2, and thankfully they got rid of the Automorph gimmick.
Ah, that's good. There you go.
Threw it in the trash.
Good.
The new gimmick was called Mech Alive, which sounds a little lame. It sounds like one of those dolls that you feed it the bottle and then it pees itself. But Mech Alive was just that when you pose the figure, there would be like robot Greeblies inside the figure that you could see that would move and spin around. So like the simplest example would be like if you've got a guy and you can see like this Greebly gear inside of his bicep, when you rotate his elbow, the gear is part of the same axle, and so it looks like it's rotating inside the arm. It's obvious, just kind of in that case, it's just like a trick of engineering where there was a tab in there anyway that just decorated the tab and made it visible so it looks like there's, robot parts moving. Some of them were more complex where, moving the arm would like spin little gears inside the chest that you can see, through gaps in the design. But by and large, it was fine. It didn't intrude on the transformation or look of the figure at all. And they're far less prone to breakage. So yeah, that was fun. And the designs were very advanced. A lot of people complain that the Revenge of the Fallen toys are like too complicated to transform. I personally find that enjoyable. I really liked the Revenge of the Fallen toy line.
Yes, actually, you know what? That's funny that you say that, Ben, because I tried transforming one of the Revenge of the Fallen figures, and I'm like, okay, some of the figures are pretty complex. Now, you're a Transformer guy, so for you, you've been transforming figures for a long time, so you probably had a great time like doing it. But for people that don't really transform as many Transformers, I was sitting there like, whoa, like there's a lot of parts like to like but again, like the engineering that comes with that is amazing. That they came up with like this figure with so many complex parts, and I think that's what makes these movie line figures a little bit different than like the traditional G1s, because the G1s, they're pretty simple. Some of them are not that hard, but once you get to these movie ones, the articulation and transforming them, some of them are pretty difficult. It's like solving the Rubik's Cube puzzle or something, man, with these Transformers.
Yeah, that's a very common complaint about the movieverse Transformers in general, but Revenge of the Fallen was definitely the peak of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of these figures, like, even for me, being experienced with it, it was just a matter of practice. Like you got to get the hang of the step order, because all that stuff matters. Getting everything to seat correctly before you finish it up, so you don't have big gaps in the car. Some of the figures were downright fiddly, where even if you know what you're doing, it just doesn't want to look right that day, and that can be frustrating. They are less approachable to kind of outsiders to the hobby, or people who aren't as interested in the newer figures. But I thought they were great. I thought the engineering was great. And I found it ironic how much I hated the film versus how much I loved the toy line for Rada. And they did introduce some other new concepts. They had a series called Human Alliance.
Okay.
And that was like a larger vehicle like this, maybe a little bit smaller than the Alternators toy line. And there were only a handful of them, but they came with like a posable little human character, Sam or Michaela or Epps, and you could actually fit the human character like in the driver's seat when the toy was in car mode, and then in robot mode they'd put like little grab handles behind some of the robots' guns or whatever. They have like a pop-out shoulder weapon. You could put the little human manning the gun turret on the shoulder or whatever. And it was kind of an early experiment as like a sort of a masterpiece, or like a master grade version of like Bumblebee and Barricade.
Yeah.
And they did a handful more of them with Dark of the Moon, but then they dropped it, probably because they were only $30 and you were getting way more than $30 worth of engineering out of them. In the aftermarket, the hard part is actually finding the human figures.
Really?
Bought
Okay.
Bumblebee because they wanted a really nice big Bumblebee, and so Sam, right in the trash with him. Who cares, right?
Right.
And a couple of them for a long time wound up being very rare, just because they were at the tail end of the line and didn't get distributed.
See, that's interesting that you're saying that, because in my mind, I want to ask you, Ben, how you're saying that like Sam, a lot of the human figures are like pretty much what people are after because people threw them away. But in the Transformers movie line, like what is like those, and I hate to use this word, but holy grail Transformer movie line toys, like the guys that are worth the most, that like you barely don't see them, but they go for high prices when it comes to these movie line figures.
So the movie line figures, because of the sheer volume of them, almost none of them are high priced.
Okay.
But for movie one, there were a handful of Real Gear robots, which were like a scout-sized Transformers that turn into like little electronics. And there was the last wave was just recolors, but there's a green like Xbox controller and a black wristwatch, and who's the third one? But there were three of them released in that very last wave, and they were very rare. I never saw them in stores, and I have really good luck getting stuff in stores. I think I wound up buying them online, from some import, China or the Pacific somewhere. And those guys they're not super expensive, but they're disproportionately valuable. They're worth,
Okay.
50, $60 a piece, when most of their classmates are worth, 10. And it's
Wow.
just a matter of scarcity. But I don't think that there's enough people trying to collect every last figure like they do with the original Transformers that's going to drive those rare figures prices that high. For Radif, I think the rarest and most expensive, like, transformable figure, kind of excluding all the merchandisey stuff, is the Human Alliance Mudflap.
Hmm.
He was the final Human Alliance to be released, along with Barricade. Barricade was reissued through Takara, and Mudflap was never reissued, ever.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that one in particular is worth a couple $100. And I've noticed a trend for a lot of years that the best version of a character is usually the one worth the most money. Like,
Right.
whenever they make a completely new design, if it's better than the previous ones, everybody will go to that. And I think that it's just kind of reflects that collectors are like, I don't need all 37 movie Starscreams. I just want the best movie Starscream.
Right.
And Mudflap is, he's bigger, so he actually works with the modern movie masterpieces. And he's rare, and he's never been reissued, and there is no movie masterpiece of him. So that kind of has kept his price high, even as, like, the other Human Alliances have gone down drastically in price from where they used to be, 5-10 years ago. Because, if you want a really nice Bumblebee, you can go get a movie masterpiece Bumblebee from 2017, 16, something like that. I think 17. Yeah, it was 10th anniversary of the movies.
That's awesome. That's good to know. Now, for the audience listening, if you guys don't know, Ben runs Transformer Land with his partner Jake, and when you're at the shop and you guys are there, do you guys get customers that come in with some of these Transformers, or customers that are asking for these? Like, are these things that people are actually looking for?
The bulk of the time, it's people that are looking to get rid of them. There are modern figures from a toy line called Studio Series, which is currently ongoing. And Studio Series has aimed to make new figures for each of the movie characters. And because it was done, 10 years later, and because it's targeted specifically at adult collectors, a lot of those figures have been really good. And so, like I said, most movie collectors are only going for the one best version of that character. They're not going for every single iteration of it. And so Studio Series has supplanted almost all of these figures for a lot of people. The ones that are actually rare, like the Human Alliance Mudflap, those are the ones where people are like, do you have it? Do you have it? Do you have it? No. Unfortunately not. We have literally every other toy from the movies.
Right.
But yeah, the movie toys right now are very common and very affordable. A lot of the figures, even like decent figures, hardly break $10 anymore, just because there's so many of them on the market, and people are, going after some very specific version. When you've got, I think, 130 movie-verse Bumblebee toys to pick from, and you're only looking for the quote best one, that leaves 129, on eBay listings or on our website for sale, that people
Right.
passed up. I
Here's,
think we have had some
I'm sorry.
people that are like, I've got kids, they love the movie Transformers, the stuff in stores is really expensive, and it's like, okay, great, I can give you, 2 or 3 figures from the older lines for the price of one of the figures from the new line.
Right. No, that makes sense, man. And what's funny? I want to ask you because, you know, obviously the Transformers cartoon movie from the 80s, was amazing. And, we all cried when Optimus Prime died, and, he got shot. And then when the live action movies came out with Michael Bay, I was kind of thrown off because I was so used to the original 80s like designs for the Transformers. Fast forward to the Bumblebee movie where we get these, original 80s designs on the characters like Starscream, Soundwave was in the beginning, Optimus Prime looked like the Optimus Prime. Now, and this is the question that I want to ask you is, we all know Devastator, the original looking Devastator, and in the Transformers film, we get a Devastator. Now, what I want to ask you is, when you saw that redesign of Devastator, not the Devastator that we know, but the Devastator that was redesigned for these films, what was your initial thought when you saw that?
When I saw the toy or when I saw the movie?
When you saw the movie and then you saw the toy.
So the movie design for Devastator was interesting and had potential. I don't think they did enough with it. Like both, the one thing that both the original Green Devastator and this Devastator have in common is they're supposed to just be a mindless brute.
Right.
Devastator in G1 is always portrayed as stupid. And they explain that as like the guys that form him, they're all in the same mind trying to control this thing, and they all have different personalities, and they don't, they're not perfectly in sync. And so as a result, Devastator is stupid. He's huge, he's incredibly
Right.
powerful, but he's stupid. Because the other side is, if he was that big and strong and also, even of average intelligence, he would be able to take the Autobots apart and game over, and now we don't have a show and we don't have a toy line anymore. It's done.
Right.
Devastator killed everyone. They won.
Right.
And they did that with the movie where they portrayed him as being kind of almost just animalistic simplicity in his intelligence. But they changed it so that he had more animalistic appearance. He's hunched over. He kind of walks on all fours. But they never really, they didn't give him enough screen time to develop that the individual components were like normal guys, and then when they combine together, they're like this just monster who all he wants to do is destroy everything. And so I feel like they didn't really play up that aspect of his design, the kind of contradiction between here's 6 or 7 or 8, depending on who you ask, normal Transformers with their own unique robot modes, and then they combine together into this big brute. And like half of the time that Devastator's on the screen, he's either doing his big vortex thing where he's trying to suck in Skids and Mudflap into his big meat grinder head, and there's sand everywhere and you can't really see him. And then there's when he's climbing on the pyramid, and now you only see him from beneath, and he's got his wrecking balls swinging under there, and they zoom way in on that, and it's like, okay, but what about like showing him slapping Optimus Prime away like it's nothing because he's so huge? There were opportunities to make that design work that they missed. And they kind of did the same thing with the toys. There were opportunities to make a Rada toy Devastator work, and they missed. The toys they made for him, one was the Supreme class. It was $100, electronic, and he split apart into 6 vehicles, like bulldozer, dump truck, and whatnot. But those vehicles didn't transform into their own robot modes.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so in the Deluxe Voyager classes, Deluxe and Voyager classes, you had some of the individual members, and they transformed from a bulldozer into a robot or a dump truck into a robot. But those couldn't combine.
Wow, okay. Okay.
And there was, from 2009 until this year, I don't know, I think Jake and I may have ranted to you about this, the new Devastator that they finally finished releasing.
Yes.
All the characters you need to make them. From 2009 until 2020, the only Devastator that could do all 3 things, vehicle modes, individual robots, and a combined mode, was a Legends class one that's this big when he's all put together.
Wow. That's
But
small.
he's really cool toy. Like, the transformations are really good. The dudes, the individual dudes are all like this, but
Okay.
they're really solid. Like, they're really interesting and fun to play with, but they're tiny. It's like, I kind of
Right.
wish they would have just taken those exact same designs and just blew them up a little bit
Yeah.
and sold it as, a leader class at least. And then to make matters worse, that Legends Devastator, which was all the
I'm
rage at
looking.
the time, was a Walmart exclusive, and they only sent like one case of 4 to every other Walmart, and so most people could not get one.
Sorry, folks, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but now we're back on again, and we're here talking about Devastator. So I'm online right now, and I'm looking at the Devastator. And do you remember King X, the toy line King X? It was
Yes,
like robotics.
I'm
Ye-
quite fond of those.
So I'm looking at a picture, and as I'm looking at this Devastator, it kind of reminds me of like the multicolored King Next thing when they were like robotic and you could make a move. Yeah, like I don't know, man. There's something about this Devastator that just like depending on the one that you're getting. Now, obviously, I'm looking at one. It's called the Transformer Studio Series Devastator.
Yeah, that's the new one that finished releasing this year.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of Connects vibes. I don't know, man, but that's what it reminds me of. Maybe I'm just like still stuck in my old ways where I just love the old Devastator, man, and hopefully one day in one of the films we can get the actual Green Giant, So
Well, here's the thing. That chartreuse green that they use on G1 Devastator,
mhm.
that did used to be used on construction and roadwork vehicles. But I think the last time that, like, a large number of construction vehicles were, real life vehicles were those colors was probably like the 1950s. Because I've seen like old stamped steel like Tonka trucks,
Okay.
from like my dad's childhood or earlier
Yep,
that
yep,
were those colors. And then, there was a time when they used a lot of orange,
yep.
and then they went to yellow because yellow is higher visibility for the human eye. Like, that's why taxis are yellow, is you can spot the color yellow from farther away than you can identify other colors. Um, so yeah, you'd have to set, if you wanted a realistic movie, kind of like the Bumble Bee movie, where it is set in the 1980s period, you'd have to set it further back to have an excuse to viably use the Devastator green again.
That
Other
makes
than
sense.
just to use it to, appeal to us fanboys, which they might do.
I know, man. Us fanboys, we want everything right. We want everything our own way, man. But getting back to the actual toy line itself, Ben. So, did Hasbro make a lot of money? When it came to these.
I'm going to go with yes.
Okay.
They can't have sold as many toys as we have bought from people and then resold and not made boatloads of money.
Hmm.
Um, if you recall when we talked about the kind of the anime era of
Yes.
Transformers and how there was this sudden like spike in demand for new toys, so they were just like cranking out all these redecos just to have something on shelves. I definitely got that vibe very strongly from the first two movie toy lines. Movie one, if you go to our Transformer Land collector's guide page for movie
Yep.
2007, I mean, that is just enormous. Like, the little scroll bar on the side of your screen will get tiny as
Yeah.
load in all the images.
I'm actually on it right now, and there's just so many. It's just so many, man. Like,
There's a ton, and there's so much more merchandise. My collector's guides on Transformerland cover toys, and I'll sometimes stretch that definition to include things that I think are cool. Like if you scroll down to plush Transformers, They've got
Yep.
Slumblebee and Softimus Prime.
Yes, yes.
So these are actual plush figures, and they are Transformers. Both of them have
Wow.
Velcro on their back, and you turn them inside out and stuff their arms and legs in there, and it turns into a car or truck.
Wow, okay. I mean,
Um,
that's actually pretty cool.
yeah, I
You,
thought they were adorable and great, but I mean, they did so much stuff, and they did so much experimenting. Like the plush Transformers thing, that was somebody at a Hasbro board meeting is like, what if we just made him turn inside out so you can a little kid can take Optimus to bed and he won't break, and he's still a Transformer because he still turns into a truck with Velcro, you know?
yeah,
And they're
yeah.
like, sure, do it, you know? And some of these experiments they never came back to, like that one, and others kind of reappeared in the Roddiff toy line, like the Fast Action Battlers, where they're transformable, but they're simpler, and they
Okay.
just have like a missile launcher or something. That came back, so obviously they did well with that, and wanted to do it again for Roddiff. Um, the one where I'm not sure how well it went on the secret Hasbro budgetary side is the third toy line, the Dark of the Moon toys.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
Initially, it might look pretty big, but the reality of it is that it was most of what you see on our archive for that is store exclusives and other like low production late wave items that barely were not canceled.
Mm.
So if you were checking your Walmart's deluxe Transformers peg, you were only going to see like 8 different toys, and then the line is gone.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and most of these were very low release. They still had a bunch of exclusives, but they were actually hard to find. They did the stores weren't buying as many cases of Toys R Us exclusives,
Right.
and so the line felt a lot smaller and like more claustrophobic. Like, oh, this is wave 2, and the line is already on clearance. Like I remember, Park Falls has a Family dollar store, and they had 2 deluxe classes, which were normally $10 a piece at that time, like taped together with a big sticker on them, 2 for $5.
Wow.
Like a
Wow.
couple months into the movie line release. Um, the
Wow.
first 2 movies, almost every toy that was released in the first 2 movies was redecoed and sold again at least once within the space of that movie. The Dottom stuff, a lot of these things never got redecoed, and that tells me that they weren't moving enough volume to
Right.
justify trying to sell you another Bumblebee when you still hadn't bought the first one. Um, and
Yeah.
as such, a lot of these figures are either rare and not valuable, or actual holy grails, like super hard to find,
Mm.
worth considerable amounts of money. Um, Although Studio Series, I think, recently took out the most valuable Dark of the Moon figure, who was
Yep.
only released in Japan. He's the NASCAR, that's like the Target NASCAR,
Yep. Yep.
and they designed a deluxe class figure, which is kind of like the standard, you know, collector series fit size for a car. And he was going to be a Target exclusive for that class, and they canceled it.
Oh, wow.
And so it only came out in Japan without a Target logo because it wasn't being released through Targets because it's Japan and Japan doesn't have Target. Um, so yeah, there were a few of these that wound up very scarce, and they did a lot less experimentation with like unique scales or unique action features. They did continue a few of the things that they had done prior. Um, Sometimes they just like had the same thing but renamed it.
Right.
One area that the third movie toys did expand was what was formerly called the Legends class, which are like these little $5 minifigures, just a couple inches tall. They're transformable, but obviously very simple. The Dottom toy line expanded that, and they started calling them Cyberverse. And there was a Legion class, which is almost the same as the Legends class, just little dinky guys, usually no accessories. But then they had the Cyberverse Commander class, which are, again, miniature versions, but they're miniature versions of bigger characters. So you have your Optimus Prime, your Megatron, your Sentinel Prime, the guys that turn into big stuff, and those are like this big. They're bigger than the little tiny guys. And then they released a few play sets and other things to do with all these little minifigures.
It's kind of like Hasbro had to reimagine every time a new Transformer movie came out. I can just picture those board meetings like, all right, we got Transformers 8 coming out. What do we have? Hey, we still have Bumblebee. We can redesign them for the 8th time in a row. Just being in those meetings, because it's just like, and like you said, Ben, there's different ways of transforming them, different things that they can do. Now, I'm here at the Transformer Land page, and I gotta say, I am a big sucker when it comes to Transformers being, real life objects that we use every day.
Yeah.
And I love the Real Gear robots, and I'm looking at the Photon one, the T-34, and the Meantime watch, and I am one of those guys that when it comes to these Transformers looking like everyday objects that we use, I'm just like, yes, I want to get that right there, man. And I'm looking at that Photon one, and I'm like, I'm really digging that. I mean, we did have what's his name, Ben? The
Reflector?
Original camera reflector. Yeah. So what's this? Like his brother or cousin over here that we're looking?
So it's actually funny you picked that out, because I think there is a Transformers club, it's canon, but it's kind of not a general release thing, called Shattered Glass. Where it's an alternate universe where the Autobots are bad and the Decepticons are good.
Yeah.
And because it was only for the Transformers Club members, they used a lot of other designs that were made for toys that were never put into a movie or whatever. And the Photon T-34, I believe they used that toy as the basis for Shattered Glass Reflector.
Gotcha.
So they take some of these movie toys that weren't in the movies, and they'd be like, okay, well, nobody's using this design, so we're going to make it this thing. And that's one of them that they picked up. But yeah, the Real Gear robots, that's to this day, is one of my favorite sections of the movie toy line. I really like the binoculars, long view and far sight. Some of them are very dated, like Speed Dial and Wiretap and Highline are all flip phones.
yeah, that's awesome. I'm thinking
Booster, X10, and Nightbeat, where they're actually like an MP3 player. Before everything was just on your smartphone, you actually had a separate MP3 player with a little headphone. But yeah, I really enjoyed those. And unfortunately, that's one thing they never did bring back.
Yeah, I'm looking at Spy Shot right now on eBay, and he is not expensive at all. I can literally buy him for $12. It's not an expensive figure whatsoever. So I might just order some of these, man, depending on the price, because $12 is pretty cheap. So
yeah, other than the 3 rare ones, almost all of these guys are going to be around $10 or less.
Oh, that's awesome. That is and I'm looking at also, we got the, like you mentioned, the Bumblebee All-Spark Blaster, the role play. That's pretty cool looking. I mean, you know what? Again, I'm a sucker for these Transformers that are everyday objects, and I will always buy Transformers that look like a microwave, look like a water bottle, whatever it is. I'm gonna end up picking that stuff up. So
I gotta lead you. because you brought this up, I got to lead you to one of my favorite movieverse toys ever.
Okay.
So go to our Revenge of the Fallen page. If you scroll up to the top of the page, I've got like a little arrow link that'll take you to the next movie, right under the title there.
Yep, Revenge of the Fallen. Yep.
Okay, and then on the left side, you see the subgroups menu.
Yep.
Click on Scout Class,
Okay.
and then look in the second row there at Ejector.
Yes. Okay.
He actually turns into
That
there's a real life model of Toaster that looks exactly like that.
that is pretty awesome, man.
And he turns into this little four-armed monster guy with big chompy face and little claws. And it's pretty much the best thing ever.
That okay, that's pretty awesome, man. I'm digging that, man. And I'm also digging Scalpel. He looks like the robot from Nintendo.
Yeah, so Scalpel is supposed to be a microscope. The way I've photographed him, the lenses that you look through are kind of facing forward to the camera. And he actually does appear in the movie. He's the little tiny robot with the German accent and the glasses that repairs Megatron.
Oh, yes, yes.
Here's the problem. This toy is so fragile that sealed ones are broke. Because he's got like those little spider legs.
Yes.
And they made those out of the thinnest plastic, and they have these ball joints.
Okay.
And so, like, every carded Scalpel we get, like, sealed on the card still that we get into the shop, we have to look at and laugh at, because they have him in his little spider mode. And you can see the cracks forming on all of those joints without anybody having ever touched it. And so he's actually very difficult to find, like, really complete and nice. And even if you do, a couple of his legs are going to be loose because those joints are starting to crack.
Right, right. Wow, that's cool, man. Yeah, man. Like you know, I'm really gonna dig down the rabbit hole and just like try to collect as much as these, whether it's G1 or you know whatever transformer that transforms from everyday objects. Like I know the Micronauts, they were doing that too, where it was like a Pepsi can. There was like a little robot inside of it or a little micro knot.
So the Micronauts come from a Japanese toy line called Micro Change. And that's where a lot of those G1 characters like Reflector, the camera, or Perceptor, the original microscope, or even Soundwave with the micro cassette recorder. All of those guys came out of Micro Change.
Okay.
Microman, that toy line in Japan, got kind of a resurgence in the early 2000s. And they did do a little bit more of that. In fact, I've got some here. I just happen to have these in a pile here by my desk. But we've got, this is, put the camera up so I can make sure I got it on here.
That's awesome.
We've got the cup of noodles, and this opens up, and you got your little Microman in here, and he's got a little, this unfolds into a helicopter.
Okay, I am.
And then this thing can like lift up the cup of noodles as like a trailer.
All right, I'm sold already. Like that is awesome. I love things like that, man. Like, oh man, that is awesome. What? Where did you pick that up, Ben?
I snagged it when it came into the shop.
Oh,
these are also not expensive. I can turn you on to exactly what to search for. But these are not particularly valuable because they're not from the 80s.
Gotcha. Man, that's awesome, man. Yeah, man. Look, I don't mean to sidetrack, you know, especially for the audience listening. You know, we're doing a video cast, and Ben was showing me the Micronaut. It came like in one of those ramen noodle cups, man. It was pretty awesome with a little guy in there, a little vehicle. So that was pretty awesome, giving the audience the visual. But yeah, going back to this Transformers toy movie line universe, what would you say, Ben, is like, I'm not gonna say like all-time favorite, but what are maybe like 2 or 3 Transformers from this whole gamut of Transformer movie line? Like, what are like the two or three that you really, really liked?
So from the first three movie toy lines, almost nothing from Dottom is in my top 20 list.
Wow. Okay.
And almost all of them are from Roddiff.
Yep.
It's funny, we were talking about the Optimus Prime thing and how they changed him so drastically from movie 1 to movie 2. So the movie 2 Optimus Prime, the leader class, in my opinion, is one of the best crafted Transformers ever.
Wow.
He looks incredible in both modes. He
Yeah.
has a very interesting transformation, and he has a gimmick where he can combine with Jetfire. Like,
Mm.
you remember at the end of the film, Jetfire like rips out his own spark, and
Yes.
then he like Jolt uses his electro whips to like attach all of Jetfire's parts as body armor for Optimus Prime to wear, and it gives him, you know, Jetfire's wings and rocket engines so he can go flying after Megatron. The toy can do that.
Ooh. Okay.
And the Jetfire figure is pretty solid and also can combine with the Optimus, but the Optimus is definitely the shining star of the two, just because that figure is so great on its own. Like, here's the great thing, you wouldn't even realize that he can combine with Jetfire if you just had the Optimus toy.
Really?
Which, to me, is a sign that they did it right, because it's not intruding on how he looks. Like, there's no big, you know, gaping holes where you're like, well, obviously something plugs in here, but I just opened it and I don't have anything else to plug in here, you know, until you buy this other figure. So that's one of the big standouts. And then one of my favorite figures of all time kind of sneaks in on a technicality. Between Roddiff and Dottom, they made a somewhat mysterious toy line called Transformers. They just called this toy line Transformers.
Really?
And
Okay.
they had two like subsections of the series. One was Reveal the Shield, which was like your G1 characters in modern bodies. They called it Reveal the Shield because they had rub signs like the old G1s do, where you warm it up and it shows whether it's an Autobot or Decepticon.
Right.
And those were all, they were a lot more G1 looking. They transformed more like G1s in a lot of cases. They kind of fit in with what we call Chug, which is Classics, Henkei, Universe, Generations. Basically, modern versions of the G1 characters, but they're still G1 in a way. You know, they just turn into a new car instead of a 1980s car. But the other half of Transformers, or Transformers 2010, because it came out in 2010, we call it that just to have something to differentiate by, was called Hunt for the Decepticons. And this was a subline that is explicitly part of the movie universe, even though it isn't part of the actual movie toy line.
Okay.
And the story is after Revenge of the Fallen, the Autobots have teamed up with the humans, you know, teamed up with the U.S. military, of course, and they're hunting down all the Decepticons that are still hiding on Earth. You know, that's kind of what they're doing at the beginning of the movie, is hunting down Decepticons that are hiding somewhere on Earth and trying to kill them before they knock any buildings down. And so the Hunt for the Decepticons toys were either movie toys, movie characters, or designed similarly to movie toys. And one of them is called Breacher.
Huh.
And he is like an amphibious armored truck with the turret on top. And at the time these came out, these would have been like $6 or $7 at Walmart, right?
Okay.
And this figure is incredible. He has an incredible transformation. He has a clean robot mode. He doesn't have like all this junk sticking out from his robot body. He's super posable. He comes with you can take the turret gun off and like plug it onto his, you can either put it on his arm or you can put it on his fist or you can put it on anywhere that has like a bar.
Okay,
There
that's
was
awesome.
a joint they designed. It's like a C-clip, and so they'd have like these little bars, and you can clip the joint on all over, a bunch of the different figures that share it. But he's this little compact figure like this, and he's just a masterpiece of engineering. Like
Oh, that's
he's not a
awesome.
character that anybody's ever written a story about.
Hmm.
He's just an incredibly well designed figure. And so a lot of times when people ask me if what's your favorite Transformer toy? You've got all these Transformers. Which is your favorite one? I'm like, this one. This is the best shit because they
Right,
did
right.
everything and they didn't make it huge to do it. They fit it all in this tiny little package for $7, and that is one of the figures that is absolutely worth hunting down, no matter what kind of Transformers you like to collect. He's just a great, great figure. I cannot say enough how much I love that little thing. Just
Man, that's
because
awesome.
he proves that there is a way to do it right. Like there's a right way and a wrong way to do a Transformers toy, and that was definitely the right way in all things.
I'm sure that everybody listening right now is writing this down. They're like, okay, that I know exactly what to get right now. Everybody's
Hunt
writing
for the
this down.
Decepticons breacher.
Everybody's writing it down, man. No, that's awesome. I didn't even know about that, man. Like, I feel like going through this whole, and for those listening, if you go to Zero Box Price Podcast under the Toy Owl segment on YouTube, there's a playlist called Toy Owl, and you can see there's a good at least 6 videos. We're going through this whole Transformer universe, like history, and I've learned so much from yourself, Ben, and Jake, and you guys have given me so much knowledge on Transformers, stuff that I didn't even know, and I'm getting even more into Transformers talking to you guys. But before we finish up with the Transformers movie toy line, and I just want to know from you, do you have a massive collection when it comes to the Transformers movie line, or is it just like you just dabbled into a certain figures here and there?
So I am an absolute fool. Um, and everything that you see photographed on our collector's guide for the Transformers movies
Yes.
is in my collection.
Wow. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so
So that. All right.
I have my collection spreadsheet here in front of me, and I'm going to give you the rundown.
Okay.
Um, this is sets, so gift sets count as one, right?
Right.
If you came with 2 or more figures, this is one set. I have from movie 1
Yep.
173 figures, or sets, I should say,
Wow.
sets. From movie 2, I have 156. From movie 3, I have 135.
Oof.
Movie 4 is 78. As you can see, there's a huge drop in how big that line is.
Yeah.
Movie 5, I have 101. Bumblebee movie, Bumblebee. I
Yep.
have
Yep.
55. And then Studio Series, which is the modern line that's like still releasing, that they made the new Devastator. I have 68.
Wow.
So that's just for the movies.
And that's just for the movies. That's just for the movies.
Yep.
Wow, wow. I mean, like, I know we spoke about this in another podcast, Ben, but I know that most of your collection is back home in Wisconsin, correct? Not all of
Yeah.
it is in Florida.
Most of it's in storage right now, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, what size room would you need, like, to just display your whole collection? Or would you love to display your whole collection?
Would I love to? Yes. What size room? Several.
Okay,
Like
so you
it,
need several.
it depends on how you display. I like to display pretty loose so that I
Okay.
can take a figure down off the shelf easily, transform it into car or jet mode, and put it back on the shelf. Like you can't fit many figures on a shelf and still be able to do that Like you got to
Right.
put them all in robot mode in neat rows, in risered with the tallest guys in the back. Even then, I'd probably need a few bedrooms to put everything up. I mean, we're talking a few thousand figures, so yeah, it would take quite a few shelves full.
You know what? That would actually be pretty cool to see because like you can actually do theme rooms. Like here's all G1, the G1 line all the way to this. Here's the room filled with Transformer movies. Like you can have your own themed rooms. Now that I'm thinking about it, man.
First, I got to get my own themed house, and then I can fill it with themed rooms. And then we gotta set aside at least a couple rooms for my wife's collection. There's quite a few Masters of the Universe figures in the original line. Plus, if you want to set up an Eternia, that's a whole kitchen table right there.
Wait, does
So,
your wife actually have an Eternia?
oh yeah, yeah. Sandra has a full collection of U.S. released Motu figures.
Wow. Wow.
She's just missing the Italian exclusives.
Oh wow. So between your wife and your Transformer collection, I think you guys can have a pretty awesome museum actually, if you think about it, with Masters and Transformers. I mean, two big 80s lines from the 80s that went head to head. So
Yeah, that has been pitched to me before. Um, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I'd feel about having my collection
mhm,
in
mhm.
the public eye, even behind glass. You know,
Right, right, right,
it's just having built these collections. Certainly for me with Transformers, my entire lifetime.
right.
Like from the time I could hold a Transformer till now, I have been continuously putting this collection together. Um, now that you're posing it to me this way, it kind of feels like an intensely personal thing. Where it would be like if I did have it all on display, it would be like by invitation only. I'd be like, hey, Steve and Aaron, come on, fly down to Gainesville and spend a week here and check out the old collection. But I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel about having it all out in the public. And I know there are some like big toy collections slash museums, like
Yeah.
Rancho Obi-Wan,
Yes, yes,
which is
yes.
it's a private collection that is assembled under the auspices of a 501c3 into this
Yes.
huge museum. Of course, that's not just toys. That's just everything Star Wars.
Everything Star Wars. Yeah, yeah.
But
And
like,
have you heard of Mewtwo collector? They just interviewed him, and it's just like the Rancho Obi-Wan. He collects everything Masters of the Universe, and his collection is insane. From
who,
cups to
who is
ties.
this?
Motu collector.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. He just got interviewed on YouTube, and he collects everything. It's just everything He-Man, and I was just like, wow, like cups, plates, every single thing, man. And it's one thing to collect, your toys, but then I mean, can you just imagine, Ben, if like you collected everything Transformers, everything that was out there on the market?
I mean, I'm trying. There's a significant chunk of my collection that is merchandise,
Right, right,
is what I would
merchandise.
call it. And that there during 2007 movie, some generous forum member assembled a complete list of Transformers 2007 movie merchandise, like an exhaustive list.
Wow.
And it is like I back in '07, I printed it out,
Yep.
like printers are still a little kind of exciting back then. And it is just like this sheaf of paper just to list all the merchandise just for the one movie. And there's tons of G1 merchandise, and some of this stuff never comes up. Like there's an Optimus Prime cookie jar from 1984, and it's a ceramic
Okay.
cookie jar like yay big, and that thing, like, I'm sure it's worth hundreds of dollars, if not more, because how many did they make compared to Optimus Prime action figures? Not many.
Right.
How many got chipped and thrown away? How many are missing the lid? That stuff. I mean, when I find it, I do collect it, but at a point you got to prioritize too. If I
Yeah.
had Bill Gates money, you can bet I would hunt down every last, ridiculous licensed knockoff quality dollar store, pencil sharpener kit. But you got to draw a line. And I guess for me, because I enjoy my collection by playing
Yeah.
with it,
Yep.
I have this stuff by my desk so I can sit here and transform my new Earthrise Corden. The merchandise side of it doesn't appeal to me as much. But what about you? I can't quite make out everything that's on your shelves back there. How big are you into merchandise?
For turtles, I have a few things, not a lot. I got like a Ninja Turtles 2 book, a Donatello lamp, a cup. There's you can't see it, but by the turtle blimp, by the Ghostbusters firehouse, up to like the right, where you see. So if you see the blimp in the background, the big
Yep.
green thing, and then you can see like the Technodrome, and there's like a
Yep.
giant turtle. Right next to that giant turtle, there's a TMNT 1980s trash can, metal trash can.
Oh, the corner of it on top of the white shelving unit?
Yeah, on top of the white
Okay.
shelving. Yeah. So yeah, I have that. I don't really collect too much merchandise. Like if it's a movie or a toy line that I'm really into, I'll pick it up. Like for example, I was at the flea market this past summer, and I ended up picking up a GI Joe VHS clamshell. I'm just getting into GI Joe a lot. I've been watching a lot of the cartoon series on the Hasbro website, and
We should
yeah,
have waited and done the G.I. Joe episode until now that you're really into it. Seen more than the first couple episodes.
yeah. Now I'm really getting into Joe. Obviously Transformers. I'm getting into Transformers now a lot. A lot of toy lines that I wasn't into, I'm starting to see that I'm collecting now, like Transformers, GI Joe, Masters of the Universe. It's hard for me because like I just don't focus on one particular line. My mind is on everything, whether it's retro and some cool modern stuff. But like you said, Ben, if I have Bill Gates money, I'll be buying everything under the earth. So, and hopefully one day we will have Bill Gates money, man. But yeah, man. Um, to wrap up, because we went to this whole Transformers movie toy line. I always ask you this question, Ben. This is the question that I always ask all the time of you: is for the audience listening, if they were to start collecting the Transformers movie line, do you think it'll be best for them to start either with the first movie or just like whatever movie they like the most?
There's so many toys. I'm gonna go with my old tired answer. Get what you like.
Okay.
But with the movie specifically, if you're just kind of dabbling in it, it's so easy to do because all of this stuff is so inexpensive right now. Like, don't start with trying to hunt down the Human Alliance mud flap, but like you were looking at the Real Gear robots. That's what piques your interest. Go get them. They're dirt cheap. I mean, $12. What can you get for $12? If those
I know.
things were on a Walmart peg today, they'd be more than $12.
Yeah.
And these are figures that you can play with. You don't have to worry about them. You can mess around with them. Yeah, some of them are complex. Well, most of them are well designed enough that you can just pop them back together if a joint comes undone or whatever. But even if you break it, it's like, okay, well, I can get another one for $6-8. It's fine. So I guess in that way, it's kind of a low risk collection. That, and they've already taken all the depreciation hit they're going to take value-wise. So it's not like you're spending $500 on something that's going to be available for $200 next year. The prices are kind of at the basement of where they're ever going to be. So they're very easy to collect, and just seek out the ones you're most interested in, and be careful with the automorph mechanisms. But the other thing is, a lot of these guys were released multiple times in multiple different toys, and a lot of the times it didn't even like match what they looked like in that movie.
Mm.
Like there's a Jazz toy in Revenge of the Fallen. Jazz wasn't in Revenge of the Fallen. He was dead by then. Like
right.
Go out and get whatever Jazz toy you like. That's fine. And it's so like dauntingly impossible to collect the whole thing that I sincerely doubt anybody would try it. And so it even more emphasizes the look at all of them, find out which ones, pique your curiosity or pique your interest or even, fit the budget, and then go for those and enjoy it. Because being a collector and being stressed out about NECA changing their release dates on shit or Amazon canceling your pre-orders for something that you really wanted and ordered months ahead of time to be sure, and they're like, well, we don't know how many we're getting in the warehouse. I guess we didn't get enough. Like, that sucks. And this is something that if it does interest you to collect some of these older movie figures, there is no stress involved in that. They're cheap. You buy them, enjoy them. They're easy to find. Almost all of them are very easy to find. And so it's something you can have fun with if the movieverse is something that interests you. And I know there's a lot of people that hate everything to do with the movies, including the toys, and that's fine too.
No, that's awesome. So there you go, guys. There you have it, man. For the audience listening, man, just collect what you want, collect what you're into. Don't worry about it. And again, these Transformers are relatively cheap. You can I'm gonna get the Spy Shot. It's only like $12. So for everybody listening right now, man, you can get most of these toys on eBay, or you can get them at. I'm gonna have Ben plug where you can get some of these toys at right now.
Well, we have a lot of Movieverse toys at Transformerland.com. And they are all sad and looking for new homes. So definitely hit up our store. Even the rare ones we usually get in once every year, once every 2 years. So Transformerland.com, or if you just want to look at pictures, go to Transformerland.com and click on the guides and wiki and just look for the movies. They're all right there in the menu, movie 1 through 5. And you can scroll through all of the Bumble Bee toys that I have foolishly purchased with my hard-earned money over the last 13 years.
Oh, man. So there you go, guys. Check out Transformerland.com. I'm not only the president, I'm also a client. So I am also a customer of Transformerland.com. You guys can subscribe to us at Cereal Box Pride Podcast on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the like button. Also, go over to anchor.fm. You can catch us there. You can catch all the episodes over there. Follow us on Instagram at Cereal Box Prize Podcast. Also on Facebook, that's Cereal Box Prize Podcast. And man, this was fun. Next year coming up, 2021. Oh man, I do not want to go back in time to 2020. But 2021, we're gonna continue with the movies. And I just want to wish everybody a happy holidays, and stay healthy and stay safe. And I also want to say thank you to Ben for, Anchor just sent me a message telling me that we have over 1,245 minutes of podcasting done. So it's awesome. And and I wouldn't be able to do this. I wouldn't be able to do this without Ben, Jake, and Aaron. So I want to say thank you to you guys for helping, and happy holidays to you guys as well. And Ben, is there anything you want to say before we get out of here?
Just on that note, happy holidays. Stay safe. I think we're all tired of hearing it, but you got to make some hard choices this year, and I think it's important to to give up some of the fun we might have had on a normal year and just make sure that we're all around to have that fun next year.
And there you go, guys. There you have it. And we will see you all next year here at the Silver Box Prize Podcast Toy Out.